This is unacceptable, officer.
Sir, I need you to step back.
A decorated army colonel, a fallen soldier's remains, and a flight he was blocked from taking. What unfolded next shook the entire nation. The airport was alive with the usual restless energy, families wrestling with oversized luggage, business travelers tapping furiously on laptops, children darting between strangers' legs while their worn-out parents struggled to keep pace, the kind of controlled chaos that defines every major American terminal on any given afternoon. Colonel Marcus Webb had walked through airports like this more times than he could count. His polished dress shoes struck the tile floor with quiet authority, each step deliberate, measured, the walk of a man who had learned long ago that composure was its own kind of armor. But today was heavier than usual. The weight pressing against his chest had nothing to do with the medals and service ribbons pinned to his uniform. It came from something far more solemn, the casket sitting on the tarmac outside, wrapped in the American flag, waiting. Specialist Andre Mitchell, 22 years old, had come home, just not the way anyone had prayed he would. Colonel Webb pulled the brim of his service cap down slightly and steadied himself. He had a duty to perform, one that went beyond rank, beyond recognition, beyond anything personal. It was a promise, the kind soldiers make to each other in the quiet moments before the chaos. No one gets left behind, not in the field, and not on the way home. He approached the ticketing counter, sliding his military orders and government-issued ID across the surface with calm efficiency. The woman behind the desk glanced down briefly, typed something, then looked up again, and that was when it happened, a pause, just a fraction of a second too long, the kind that people who have been overlooked their whole lives learn to recognize immediately. "Sir," she said, "could I see these again?" Her voice had tightened, just slightly, the way a door tightens when the wood swells in humidity, subtle but unmistakable. Webb handed the documents back without a word, watching her closely, the small hesitation, the sideways glance toward her colleague 2 stations down, the almost imperceptible shift in her posture, like someone who had just stepped onto uncertain ground and wasn't sure which way to move. She turned away briefly, whispering something to the other agent. He looked over, his face carefully blank, the kind of blank that takes practice. When she returned, her smile had changed. It was the customer service version, stretched thin, practiced, hollow. "I'm sorry, sir, but it appears there's a complication with your reservation. We're unable to process your boarding at this time." Webb exhaled through his nose, slow, controlled, years of training keeping the heat in his chest from reaching his voice. "I am escorting the remains of a fallen soldier," he said evenly, pressing one finger lightly on the stack of paperwork. "All documentation is current and fully authorized." The agent's eyes dropped to the counter. "I understand, sir, but there's a security protocol we're required to follow, and unfortunately we cannot make exceptions at this time." Security protocol. Webb kept his face still. He had navigated combat zones, foreign embassies, rooms full of people who didn't want him there, but something about this particular moment, this terminal, this counter, this thin explanation, settled in his chest like a stone. "What protocol?" he asked, his tone even, his eyes direct, specifically. The agent opened her mouth, closed it, then tried the smile again. "It's just standard procedure, sir, policy." He did not step aside, he did not lower his voice, he simply stood there, unmovable, the way men stand when they know they are right and are willing to wait for the world to catch up. Behind him the line had begun to grow. Travelers who had been buried in their phones or half asleep on their feet were slowly tuning in. Something about the stillness of the man at the counter, the uniform, the composure, the quiet refusal to be dismissed, was pulling their attention like gravity. Colonel Webb's voice remained measured. "Ma'am, I need a clear explanation. This is an official military assignment, not a personal booking. My credentials are valid, my orders are current. I need to understand the actual reason I am being denied." The agent looked toward the back of the counter again. The other staff members had clustered near a back terminal, heads low, voices quiet. Then a supervisor appeared, a man somewhere in his mid-50s with the kind of tired eyes that come from years of managing situations nobody prepared him for. He straightened his name tag out of habit, folded his arms, and approached. "Colonel," he said, professional tone fully deployed, the kind built specifically to make questions feel unreasonable, I do want to apologize for any inconvenience. We do have certain procedural requirements in place and I'm afraid we simply are not in a position to override them right now." Webb studied him. There it was again, the same smooth wall of vague language, policies, procedures, protocols, words designed to sound like answers while saying absolutely nothing. "I have escorted soldiers before," Webb said, the firmness underneath his calm finally becoming audible. "I am familiar with the process. There is no standing policy that prevents a military escort from boarding, so I'd like you to tell me plainly, what is the actual reason?" The supervisor cleared his throat, shifted his weight, glanced briefly at the gathering line behind Webb. "It is simply an additional security measure, Colonel, nothing personal." "Nothing personal." Webb's jaw tightened. He held it there, controlled. He had been in enough rooms with enough powerful people to know exactly what this was. They were waiting, hoping the silence or the stares or the growing crowd would make him sharp, make him loud, give them something to point at. He had no intention of cooperating with that plan. The people behind him were fully alert now. A woman in a red blazer had stopped mid-sentence and was watching with narrowed eyes. A young man near the far railing had lowered his phone from his ear and was frowning at the counter. A heavy-set man in a construction jacket had stopped walking entirely, standing off to the side with his arms crossed. Then a voice came from somewhere in the middle of the line. "Hey, is there a problem with his military clearance?" Webb turned slightly. The man who had spoken was older, maybe mid-60s, weathered face, straight posture, a faded USMC cap pulled close to his brow, a veteran. You could tell not just by the hat but by the way he stood, like someone who had learned a long time ago that standing down wasn't always the right move. The supervisor looked toward him carefully. "No sir, this is strictly a procedural matter, nothing related to clearance." The Marine let out a short breath through his nose. "Been flying in and out of airports my whole life," he said, "served 2 tours, never once saw a policy that stopped a soldier from bringing one of our own home, so what exactly is the procedure you're talking about?" The murmur in the line sharpened. Phones came out, slowly at first, then one by one, the soft tap of record buttons filling the air. The airline staff behind the counter could feel it. The agent who had first denied Webb was now staring very hard at her keyboard, typing nothing, just staring. The supervisor turned back, composure slightly thinner now. "I assure you we are working to resolve this." A young woman stepped forward from just behind the line barrier. She looked about 24, maybe 25, phone already in hand. Her expression wasn't aggressive, just clear. "Excuse me," she said, looking directly at Webb, "I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. They are not letting you board." The terminal had gone several degrees quieter. Colonel Webb looked at her. "That's correct." She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once, turned her phone toward him. "I'm streaming right now," she said quietly, "people should see this." And then it opened up. A man near the window held up his phone. "This is absolutely wrong," he said. "This man is escorting a fallen soldier home." A woman further back raised her voice toward the counter. "Can someone please explain what is happening here?" A teenage boy standing with his grandfather leaned over and whispered something. The grandfather nodded slowly and took out his own phone. The agent behind the counter looked as though she was considering whether the floor might swallow her. Her hands had gone still above the keyboard, eyes darting from one recording device to the next. The Marine took one deliberate step forward. "I have seen a great many things in my years," he said, his voice steady, carrying, "but I never imagined I would be standing in an American airport watching a United States Army colonel, a man escorting the remains of a fallen brother, be turned away from his flight." He paused, let it land. "This is a disgrace." The terminal was silent enough now that the distant gate announcements could be heard as if from another world. Even the child in the stroller nearby had gone still. The mother wasn't looking at the child, she was reading something on her phone, and the expression on her face was one of quiet, growing fury. Somewhere in the back half of the line, a man said it low but clearly enough to be heard. "It's already trending." The supervisor was still absent, the airline staff frozen, the phone still raised, and then the numbers began to move. The young man in the gray hoodie let out a slow breath staring at his screen. He looked up. "It's everywhere," he said. The woman in the red blazer checked her phone, covered her mouth briefly, shook her head. The Marine grunted, pulling out his own phone now, they have no idea what's coming. Across social media the story was already running ahead of itself, a post written in plain capital letters, they just denied a black U.S. Army colonel his flight while he was escorting a fallen soldier's remains, this is how we treat our heroes. The numbers underneath were climbing fast, shares, comments, reposts, moving at the speed of outrage. A veteran advocacy group had already responded, we are aware of the situation, our soldiers deserve better, expect action. The agent who had first denied Webb reappeared briefly from behind the frosted door, took one look at the crowd, the phones, the numbers, and disappeared again. She wasn't coming back with a resolution, she was coming back with damage control. Colonel Webb stood exactly where he had been standing, he had not moved, had not raised his voice, had not asked anyone to film anything, he simply told the truth, held his ground, and let the weight of that truth do what it does when people are paying attention. The supervisor returned, but this time he brought company. A second man walked beside him, fitted navy suit, airline credentials clipped to his breast pocket, the brisk practice stride of someone whose entire career was built on containing fires before they became infernos. He scanned the scene in one sweep, the Marine, the phones, the colonel, and something behind his eyes recalibrated. Colonel, he said, his voice carefully smooth, I want to offer my personal apology for this situation. It appears there was a significant error on our end and we are moving immediately to correct it. We'd like to escort you to your gate right now, first class, of course, with our full apologies. First class. Webb looked at him for a long moment. If none of these people had spoken up, he said, if none of this had been recorded, would I still be standing here? The man in the navy suit opened his mouth. You don't need to answer, Webb said, I already know, and so does everyone else in this building. A woman near the front of the crowd said quietly, he's right. The airline representative straightened, Colonel, please allow us to get you to your flight. This is not about an apology, Webb said, his voice carrying across the silent terminal, it is about accountability, one does not exist without the other. The crowd responded, not with noise but with the more powerful thing, complete attention, the kind that makes people in positions of authority understand that they are being seen, fully, without the benefit of spin or framing. The rep turned to take the phone from a young airport security officer who had appeared at the edge of the counter, scrolled, and went pale. A major national news outlet had already published, the headline was stripped down and direct, U.S. Army colonel denied flight while escorting fallen soldier, airline under fire. Below it, the video from the terminal played, unedited, beginning to end. The rep handed the phone back, inhaled, turned to Webb. We will be issuing a full public statement, Colonel, the employees involved are being reviewed, we take this extremely seriously. The public already knows the truth, Webb said simply. Silence. Then something shifted, a man entered the terminal from the side corridor, dark blue suit, military bearing, ID badge catching the light as he approached, he moved through the crowd without effort, the way authority moves when it doesn't need to announce itself. He stopped in front of Webb and extended his hand. Colonel Webb, he said, Major Derek Holloway, Department of the Army, we've been briefed on the situation. Webb shook his hand, firm, steady. Major Holloway turned to the airline representative, his tone was even, unhurried, and left no room for negotiation. We are taking over from here. Colonel Webb and the remains of Specialist Andre Mitchell will not be requiring commercial transportation. The department has arranged a military flight, transport is already standing by. The rep blinked, Sir, we were in the process of. Major Holloway looked at him, just looked, and the sentence dissolved. He turned back to Webb, Sir, your mission is ready to continue. Webb nodded once, understood. He turned back toward the Marine, took a step toward him, extended his hand. Appreciate you, brother, he said. The Marine gripped it, we look out for our own, Colonel. Webb turned once more, just briefly, and looked out at the people who had stayed, who had spoken, who had held up their phones not for content but for conscience. He said nothing, adjusted his cap, squared his shoulders, and walked out. Not toward a gate. Toward home, toward a family waiting to receive their son, toward the completion of a promise made in the kind of silence that precedes the worst moments of a person's life. But behind him, the airline's reckoning was only beginning. The press release came within hours, carefully worded, full of phrases like deeply regrettable and isolated incident and commitment to all passengers. The public read every word and wasn't satisfied. News networks ran the terminal footage on loop, veterans organizations released formal condemnations, 2 sitting senators called for a congressional inquiry into airline treatment of active military personnel, the hashtag demanding accountability climbed to the top of every trending list by nightfall. By the end of the week the airline's stock had fallen, booking cancellations spiked, their customer service lines collapsed under the volume. Then came the legal wait. A coalition of military rights and civil rights advocacy organizations filed a formal discrimination complaint, citing failure to honor service member protections and conduct unbecoming of a federally regulated carrier. The CEO appeared on camera, measured, rehearsed, called it a misunderstanding, announced that several employees had been placed on administrative leave. Meanwhile Colonel Marcus Webb stood on a tarmac in the quiet gray light of early morning, beside a flag-draped casket, as a family walked toward him, a mother, a father, a younger sister. The sister was holding something, a photograph, Andre at his high school graduation, laughing at something just off camera. Webb stood at full attention as they approached. He did not think about the airport, he did not think about the cameras or the trending headlines or the airline statement, he thought about the promise. No one gets left behind. Specialist Andre Mitchell was home. Respect should not be something a person has to go viral to receive. It should not require a crowd of witnesses or a camera pointed at the right moment. It should be the floor, not the ceiling, the starting point, not the reward. The people in that terminal, the Marine who refused to stay quiet, the young woman who went live, the strangers who stopped walking and started watching, they did something that matters. They proved that accountability cannot survive in silence, that when people choose to see and to speak, the truth stops being something that can be managed. At Black Voices Louder, this is why we tell these stories, not to perform outrage, but to make sure the things that happen in the margins get seen in the center, because the moment we stop paying attention is the moment these things stop being stories and start being normal. If you believe in dignity, if you believe in honoring those who serve this country, if you believe that respect is not a privilege extended to some and withheld from others, then you already know what to do. Subscribe to Black Voices Louder, turn on your notifications, and share this video, because silence is how things like this happen again. And next time, it might not go viral.